we're in the end game now. The Switch 2 feels like it's dominated Nintendo discussion forever at this point. Remember back in January when we were all anticipating this thing getting revealed in a couple months? We were so young, so naive. And now here we are, 9 months later, with very little to show for it. I mean, it's not all bad. We got official acknowledgement from Nintendo, that's huge, and the surplus of upcoming incredible looking games is definitely making it difficult to feel discontent. And yet, we're all still waiting for the big one. And luckily, I don't think we'll have to wait for much longer. You see, through assembling all available info, analyzing all available patterns, and sprinkling in a dash of hope, I feel confident enough to predict the date of the Switch 2's reveal. Spoiler alert, yeah, I'm Team October, how original. But there's still important discussion to be had here. If you're not Team October, give me the chance to convince you why it's so likely. If you're already Team October, sit back and watch your predictions be corroborated by the months of evidence that have led us to this moment. Plus, you get to clown on me if I'm off by a couple days, that'll be fun. Final countdown, let's do this. Okay, the first and most important question we have to answer is a simple one. Why October? This has been the main point of contention between the believers and the disbelievers. Why would Nintendo reveal the Switch 2 in October? Sure, the first Switch was revealed in October 2016, but circumstances were vastly different. The Wii U was dead in the water, the holiday game was Paper Mario Color Splash. It's safe to say that there wasn't much momentum to be interrupted by the announcement of next-gen hardware. But the Switch is on the complete opposite side of the spectrum. While sales are noticeably slowing down, as you'd expect from a system in its 8th year, this thing is still big and has 3 highly anticipated titles dropping to dominate the holiday season. Wouldn't revealing the Switch 2 be counterproductive to the current Switch's very attainable wintry success? The answer is no. Well, that's an oversimplification, but the answer is that there are more important factors at play here than whether or not the Switch has a banger 8th holiday season. I think the most pertinent piece of information we have regarding this is actually one of the few statements we have from Nintendo about the Switch successor, specifically a quote from President Furukawa when asked about profit during the transitional hardware period. He says the following: "It is extremely important to maintain the momentum of the Nintendo Switch business going forward this fiscal year by implementing various sales initiatives for hardware and by communicating information about new software titles. In addition to this, we intend to carry out a range of initiatives in areas outside the dedicated video game platform to distribute information to our consumers. For example, via initiatives like the Nintendo Museum, which is scheduled to open in fall 2024, we consider this year to be important for sustaining the momentum of Nintendo's overall business and not just the Nintendo Switch business. At the same time, this fiscal year is when we devote ourselves to preparations for the successor to Nintendo Switch, and we believe that our top priority is to both maintain the momentum of Nintendo Switch and prepare for its successor. Rather than being overly focused on single-year profits, we have positioned this as a year to prepare for the future and to implement initiatives for continued growth and long-term rise in corporate value." Now, I'm sure a lot of you don't speak CEO, so allow me to highlight what I believe to be the most important takeaways from this statement. First, momentum. This is something Nintendo's discussed for ages at this point, long before they ever uttered the words Switch Successor. All the way back in 2020, we got this about Nintendo's future outlook, specifically in regards to maintaining consumer relationships going forward. It's a simple, readable visual that depicts what you'd expect: the expansion of Nintendo's IP, the addition of services, the continuance of Nintendo accounts, which wasn't a surprise but was the main takeaway at the time. Completely skips over the Wii U, which is very funny. I'd love to see them explain the gap in that resume. But what we see in this graphic is the same thing we hear in Furukawa's statement back in that May financial Q&A. Nintendo is extremely focused on ensuring a smooth transition to new hardware. And it makes total sense that this would be on their mind back then. Heck, it was probably on their mind by March 4th, 2017. Not only did they have the boogeyman hanging over their shoulder, but as the Switch grew more and more successful, the necessity to future-proof and win those players over next time became more and more crucial. Nintendo recognized what was potentially their greatest oversight of the previous generation. There's a difference between the owner of a system and an enthusiast of the brand. Your 82-year-old Wii Sports grandpa was a Wii owner. The 32 million Breath of the Wild players, those became Nintendo fans. But what does this have to do with the Switch 2's reveal timing? Well, it gives us some pretty important points to keep in mind. The Nintendo Switch's audience, whether they recognize it or not, have been trained to become long-term consumers of brand. Why do you think Switch 2 trends every single day? It's not only because people love the Switch, it's because they're invested in what Nintendo the company will do next. What will 3D Mario look like after almost a decade? What does Animal Crossing have in store after New Horizons' success? What beauty can Monolith Soft cook up once they're released from the shackles of a 2017 tablet? Maintaining this customer investment meant maintaining Switch output to ensure that the lack of interest that permeated the discussion of a Wii successor did not repeat itself this time around. Which brings me to my next point. The Switch is not going to stop. Sure, things will slow down, that's inevitable. I mean, this thing's about to celebrate its 8th birthday, and this year already marked our entrance into Remake Central. But I mean, look at that last Nintendo Direct, man. It'll be weak, says one. I'm not expecting much, says another. Bam, 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 bam. Surprise! Now, it's not the craziest lineup of industry-shattering AAA titles, but what it is consistent. It's maintaining interest. And while that consistency is sure to falter going forward, Nintendo's made it clear that Switch support will not up and die the moment we see the successor. All that to say, the perfect empty Switch 2 reveal window that you're imagining, it doesn't exist. There will never be a time where there's nothing to be overshadowed, no attention to be diverted, because if there is, Nintendo has failed. I don't know how many of you have ran Relay before, but if you try to come to a complete stop before passing that baton, you're probably not going to do very well. Maintaining momentum doesn't mean waiting for the Switch to sputter to a complete stop before making your next move, or holding out for some arbitrary fan goal that has very little financial relevance. It means dedicating yourself to a smooth transition of interest, even if that means stepping on your decade-old system's toes. Furukawa himself practically says as much in that statement from earlier. I believe that last line is crucial. Rather than being overly focused on single-year profits, we have positioned this as a year to prepare for the future and to implement initiatives for continued growth and long-term rise in corporate value. Will Nintendo miss out on some final Switch holiday sales by announcing the successor this year? Yes. Does that eclipse the importance of preparing consumers for the company's next decade of profit? Absolutely not. Also, something of a side note, but is a person who's considering buying their first Switch in big 2024 even the same audience as a Switch 2 early adopter? I would once again argue no. This December, we're looking at the most casual of casual players, or enthusiasts looking to collect or upgrade who already know the Switch 2 is on the way and will buy it regardless. Point being, I feel like the holiday sales argument is majorly overblown. Something else I feel is important to acknowledge from Furukawa's statement is the multifaceted nature of Nintendo profit. Nintendo isn't just a video game developer anymore, they're a full-blown entertainment company. Movies, theme parks, and, as Furukawa himself mentions, an entire museum, all of which have releases occurring in the near to very near future. A weaker holiday season in the gaming space is not the end of the world, especially since it's already shaping up to be a weaker holiday season for them. Furukawa specifically mentions that they're thinking long-term over short-term, but even looking at it from the investor money expansion point of view, the museum at least offers an avenue to mildly satiate what could be lacking in immediate hardware profit. But let's talk about the elephant in the room here. While everything I've just gone over adds fuel to the October flames for some of us believers, less than half of my work is done here. Because to believe the Switch 2 is getting revealed this year, you also have to believe that it's getting released early next year. And I'll be honest, I forgot that some people don't believe that until I got jump scared on Twitter by someone saying 2026. Ugh. Time to pivot. Important question numero 2. Why would the Switch 2 release in early 2025? Well, the answer is pretty simple. We are running out of games. But Protendo, you just said the Switch releases aren't gonna stop. True, and I stand by that, but neither did 3DS releases. I understand that there's naturally going to be some resistance to this argument, since the Switch has had about half a dozen final games at this point. Remember when people thought Mario and Rabbids was running on next-gen hardware? The concept of the Switch slowing down at all when there are no overt signs of it seems crazy. But the signs are there. You just have to look for them. Sign number 1, the year that we are currently in. Let's make things clear, you will never hear me complain about the year of Mario and Luigi's revival, okay? But that doesn't mean 2024 isn't a clear final hurrah for the Switch. And while people often cite how remake-heavy it is as the reason, I think we gain more from looking at who's behind these releases. Peach Showtime, Good Feel, The Thousand Year Door, Intelligent Systems, Echoes of Wisdom, co-developed by Grezzo, Brothership, likely Ilka, etc. Not a single EPD-led title, an entire year, carried by partners and internal side studios. Why? We know why. You don't wait until a system's launch year to start developing software for it. But the question then becomes, how much longer can Nintendo coast solely off of non-EPD, non-cross-gen development? We know Retro Studios and Game Freak are still down with the Switch next year, but the others? Monolith? You know their skills are being used for next-gen, both in headlining and support. Next Level, after Luigi's Mansion 3 sold 14 million units, I think I have a guess. Namco's back on Smash, HAL's working 3D, Mercury Steam's surely cooking up Metroid 6, the transitional period is hitting. The point I'm trying to make isn't that Nintendo couldn't scrape together and have another solid year on the Switch. Metroid Prime 4 alone would quickly shut me up if I even attempted it. The point I am trying to make is that doing so while maintaining that aforementioned momentum is an incredibly daunting task, one that I don't think Nintendo is planning to take on. Which leads nicely into sign number 2, the missing Nintendo Direct. The schedule of Nintendo presentations in the Switch era has become pretty predictable. People know when to keep an eye out every year: February, June, September, the pillars of Directs. Despite this, things can still surprise us every now and then. Sometimes Nintendo likes to trade one of those February or June generals for a partner showcase, or sometimes they miss the month entirely, which keeps it from being a completely surefire schedule. But September is different. This is the most reliable and most important Nintendo Direct. February can often coast off of the previous year's announcements if they were beefy enough, and similarly, June can take cues from February if it did a good enough job laying out the year. But September is tasked with closing out Nintendo's fiscal year, which runs March to March, and as such, is never skipped. Yup, check your calendars. Every year from 2017 to 2023 had a first-party September Direct. Every year in the Switch era, except this one. And not only did we miss out on a September Direct, we also got a first. A combined partner showcase Indie World in the last days of August. That's weird. Now, I'm sure you've heard all of this before. This is what initially led people, myself included, to assume Nintendo was clearing out space last month for the reveal. But it could just as easily point towards general marketing preparation for the big one. Because as much as we love to play into the Nintendo is unpredictable angle, this is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They don't do things for no reason. We may not always know what those reasons are, and we definitely don't always agree with them, but nothing's on a whim. Nintendo did not sandwich two presentations together at the end of August because Nintendo. Nintendo didn't avoid their most consistent announcement month and leave their fiscal year calendar unfinished for investors and shareholders because Nintendo. Something is shifting the way they operate, and we know what that something is. The third sign has less evidence pointing to it, and more so is just something that I feel makes sense, but we should acknowledge the fact that the Switch 1's reveal schedule of a fall teaser, winter presentation, and spring release was incredibly effective for Nintendo. I don't see why the company wouldn't try to repeat that success. There's other things I personally take into account, the fact that all reputable outlets and insiders still believe this thing is dropping in the first half of the year, the fact that the industry at large is preparing for an imminent reveal, but I know a lot of you are tired of rumors, so I'll stick to my interpretation of known facts. I don't know why you're more willing to listen to me, but I'm not going to stop you. Okay, we've covered why an announcement this year makes sense and why a release early next year makes sense. Now all we gotta do is focus the lens. Why October specifically, and when in October? Something I'm sure a lot of you are wondering is why Nintendo can't have their cake and eat it too. Why not reveal it after the holiday season for a spring release? Sure, a quarter-year reveal to release window would be pretty unprecedented for a major home console, but the Switch 2 is already on everyone's mind, right? Do we really have to see it this year? Yes, we do. Mass production, where secrecy goes to die. As much as they'd like to, Nintendo cannot simply snap their fingers and summon enough Switch 2s to meet demand. No, the next phase of development is pretty crucial. Large-scale manufacturing, where parts are sent to factories and come out the other side as your shiny new video gamey device. But the most important aspect of this system, despite what companies will try to tell you, are the people. Without these underappreciated workers, you do not get to play Mario. And this is particularly relevant because the only thing more inevitable in mass production than overlooked staff are factory floor leaks. Nintendo can carefully manage Switch 2 information when it's being kept between internal staff and key partners. What they can't manage is whether or not a random factory worker decides to snap a quick pic. This might not be an issue for a company like Apple, but for Nintendo, who likes to meticulously control every aspect of their unveiling process, a leak of a finalized Switch 2 threatens to throw everything out of balance. It already happened to a year-old prototype, and a pre-reveal mass production rollout would ensure it happens again on a much larger scale. Back in 2016, the Switch entered mass production immediately after Nintendo fully revealed it on October 20th, and there's no reason to think they would stupidly jump the gun this time around when they never have before. If the Switch Successor is dropping in spring 2025, we will see it this year. But how long does mass production reasonably need to last? Well, the Switch had a turnaround of a little under 5 months under its belt, but things are obviously pretty different this time around. Not only does Nintendo now have an install base of 143 million anticipating their next move, but they also have the Switch's launch to learn from. This thing was infamously difficult to get your hands on at the time, so much so that Nintendo apologized for the stock shortages they were facing. Obviously, it'd be silly to assume that the Switch 2 copying its predecessor's mass production schedule means that they're producing the exact same amount in that time, but I'd still say the Switch's 5-ish months is on the low end of what to expect. Recently, when asked how Nintendo plans to deal with scalpers once the Switch 2 drops, President Furukawa said that the best countermeasure is to simply make enough units, which sounds very funny. But if that's truly their strategy, to me that implies a longer mass production period. The additional month they'd get from going October to April instead of late October to early March like they did 8 years ago could be hugely advantageous. But let's circle back to those holiday sales for a second, because despite the fact that I think their importance is being overblown in Switch 2 speculation, that doesn't mean they aren't a factor at all. If Nintendo decided that their next system needs to be revealed this year, that doesn't mean they're just gonna plop it onto the schedule without thinking. Like I said, the perfect empty window might not exist, but the company's still going to search for the least intrusive zone to drop this major announcement. And that zone has to be in October. November and December are the holiday season sales-wise. Dropping the Switch 2 reveal then makes it extremely difficult to pivot focus back to the Switch 1's holiday and Black Friday bundles. December specifically is absolutely off the table, because if they can wait that long to start mass production, you might as well wait a few more weeks until January anyway. We also need to consider software sales. The Switch 2 will be backwards compatible, so I doubt its announcement will result in sales completely drying up, but again, it's an attention thing. It's a big deal and has the chance to distract audiences from a game's rollout, especially since the reveal will almost certainly tease some major next-gen titles. Nintendo has 2 games left in stock this year, Super Mario Party Jamboree and Mario & Luigi Brothership. And it's pretty obvious which one can afford to share those headlines. Hey, believe me, I'd love nothing more than for Brothership to completely blow sales expectations out of the water, towering over the competition, cementing itself as part of Nintendo's Big Five. But let's be realistic here. This is a Mario RPG, the most modestly performing genre under the plumber's belt, dropping within a year of 2 other Mario RPGs. I'd be ecstatic to see this game hit over 3 million. Jamboree, on the other hand, is a surefire success. Not only is its casual audience less likely to avoid it in the wake of new hardware, but it's coming off of the heels of 2 predecessors that sold over 10 million and 20 million respectively. A Switch 2 reveal during Mario & Luigi's lead-up has the chance to muddy the promotional waters, but Mario Party could absolutely power through. Last thing to note in October's favor, it's worth mentioning that Nintendo has an earnings report and investor Q&A scheduled for November 5th. Obviously, Nintendo doesn't operate under the whims of the millions of Switch successor questions that'll arise just like they did in their previous Q&A. Whatever their plan is, they'll stick to it. That said, skipping their 7-year-strong direct tradition has things looking very light for them, with nothing dated past Donkey Kong. Additionally, Nintendo usually likes going into these things with something meaty. Last year saw them announce the Zelda movie in the press release just to have something big on the horizon to talk about. The year before that, the Mario movie dropped its first trailer a few weeks prior, which led to a heavy focus during the questioning. Sales are down, the calendar is empty, audiences are antsy. It makes all the sense in the world to have the Switch 2 revealed before this meeting. Alright, magnifying glass successfully focused, October is our month. Now we get to the fun part. When? I think we can effectively process of elimination our way through this one. Of all 5 weeks in October, the 3rd is the least likely. Mario Party Jamboree may have to take a blow, but I don't see why Nintendo would draw attention away from it in its launch week. This week, assuming I get this out early enough for it to matter, is a close second. Nintendo has been heavily pushing the opening of the museum, and deflating that excitement with something that's, let's face it, far more interesting to their audience probably isn't the move. The last week of October isn't looking great either. By that point, promotion of Brothership will be in full swing, which leaves us with 2 options. Next week, or the 4th week. And call it cope, but next week just feels right. They have the chance to get this over and done with, to foster excitement for next year's release while quelling the constant pestering that currently dominates every announcement they make. They can get an earlier start on mass production and keep themselves as far away from their holiday bundles and Brothership as possible. I think we're here. And just to throw a date out there, you know what? I'ma say Tuesday. Gives them more time to go back to Jamboree promo compared to a Thursday reveal that completely invades its launch week. So that's my guess, October 8th. Which is scarily soon. At least if I'm wrong, I won't have to wait too long to find out. But as always, I'd love to hear what you think. Was I able to convert you to Team October? When do you think the Switch 2 reveal is happening? And, here's a fun one, what is your ideal Switch 2 name? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you later.